Hello, this is Brian Kelly coming to you from the Small Business Association of Michigan World Headquarters in Lansing, back from the island on Mackinac Island last week, where we had the policy conference and a lot of great conversations and work, thought leadership, and problem solving. But Sarah, it's great to be back with you.
We're glad to have you back. I like World Headquarters. That has a good ring to it. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications at SBAM, and welcome to today's briefing. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to Marana Group, our sponsor. They are a data, document, and distribution company in Kalamazoo. So Brian, you've been kind of in and out all day attending MEDC's Small Business Summit. Any quick takeaways you can share?
Yeah, actually, it was a nice summit. I was able to attend most of it. It's actually still going on at the moment, but saw some good kind of economic data laid out from the University of Michigan, the RSQE people that we've had, Gabe, that we've had on the briefing before, that Gabe gave it, and also a lot of different organizations throughout the whole state that came together to just think through what the risks are, what the needs are, and where the focus ought to be. So overall, the economic presentation, it was such that the economists really felt that the chances of recession are, while there is more uncertainty, there is a higher chance than months ago or a year ago, but he was still actually pretty confident that what we're going to see is slower growth rather than an actual recession. Although there's a pile of anecdotes that have me a little bit more nervous than that. But what the summit is really about are for the different service providers around the state that focus on and try to understand and serve the needs of small businesses. To identify gaps where things are going well, what is needed, and it's good work. It's a good opportunity for us to connect with our colleagues at the local level, and also other statewide organizations to think through some of the challenges and what the needs are likely to be moving forward.
You mentioned some anecdotes about kind of unease regarding the economy. Do you want to share some of those with us?
Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting about the Small Business Association of Michigan is that we deal with so many different businesses and so many different industries and all over the state. And we have very close relationships with so many business owners that we hear about information kind of on a piecemeal basis that starts to kind of add up, and we can get a sense of what's happening out there on the ground in terms of the economy, especially the economy more broadly speaking than whether or not General Motors or Ford is going to make a new investment, but really talking about what's happening at the local level across the entire state. Definitely picking up on less confidence than before. We've talked a lot about rising costs. We talked a lot about supply chain and difficulty finding enough people, but really that rising cost consideration is the thing that has kind of shot to the top of concerns that we're regularly hearing about, and managing through this rising costs and the idea of some chance of a recession is causing some business owners to pull back, both large and small. So we saw as big as Tesla and Elon Musk that had kind of sent out a warning that he thought that they would need to reduce their the size of their workforce by about 10%. And that's for an electric vehicle company in the middle of the highest gas prices that we've seen in 40 years. So there's really something to that for sure. But then also on a more local level, things like organizations that were going to do hiring, going to add 1 or 2 or 3 people, nothing that would ever make the newspaper, but just pulling back and deciding, now is not the time. I want to wait this out. See consumer confidence taking a dip too. And that's usually a precursor to softer economic times. Again, we don't know if it's just going to be slower growth, more flat, or an actual recession, but definitely dicier to where there are enough organizations now to where it's caught my attention saying, you know what, I was going to expand a bit, and rather than do so, I'm going to wait this out a bit, or maybe lost an employee and I'm not going to replace that employee just yet. I'm going to see how things go, and get enough of those that add together, and then you see kind of softening of the economic projections at the macro level. It does start to paint a picture that the likelihood of softer, more difficult year ahead is likely. And then it's also the mood out there of the electorate. Those who vote in elections and things. It's souring for sure. It really is something to see just the general dissatisfaction. There's something about gasoline at $5 a gallon that even people that are more of the upper middle class are still feeling that on top of all the other cost increases, and so it's just across the board. It's going to have an impact, and then the Federal Reserve raising interest rates as well, which naturally is one of the only tools that they have to try and tame inflation, but also going to result in some additional pinch on consumers in the local level at a time when everything else is going up too. So lots of concerns, and it's really caught my attention that I've just seen enough examples in the local level and different types of businesses now that it's got me a little more concerned about the longer term prospects of a recession than would have seemed possible just 6 months ago.
All right. And then we've recently heard that the Biden administration is considering repealing some tariffs to help ease supply chain issues and rising costs.
Yeah, this was one. There's not a lot of things that surprised me, but this one did kind of surprise me when it looks like the Biden administration is seriously considering removing some tariffs, some Trump-era tariffs on Chinese imports. And of course, the supply chain goes all over the world. There are a lot of things that are imported to the United States from China. There was a balance of powers or balance of trade issues that the Trump administration tried to deal with through the use of tariffs. It was very controversial at the time, but so moving kind of away from free trade and more toward tariffs that would kind of hold at bay some of these import-export relationships. I would not have expected the Biden administration to be at a point where they're considering this, but between an already more costly import relationship because of supply chain issues and also shortages and overall inflation, this is one of the things that apparently they feel could make some difference in providing some relief at the local level. A year ago, if you would have told me that the Biden administration was considering repealing tariffs to Chinese imports, I wouldn't have believed it. And so just shows you that they're getting a taste for it. The way that the mood of citizens that are just trying to live their lives these days has really soured, turning over all the stones to try and find different potential solutions. Even the discussions with organizations like countries like Saudi Arabia to try to get additional gasoline imports and oil imports to the United States. That's another thing that you never would have expected to see happen before, although probably a more direct or straight line on that would be here in Michigan to stop trying to shut down Line 5 and give some more confidence there as well, and for the feds maybe to back off on some of the executive orders on the very first day of the Biden administration that restrict the early exploration work on oil drilling in territories that we don't have to go to other countries for. So there are some things that some things that I never thought that they would have considered. They're starting to go down that road. Although I must say that the Biden administration's energy policies from the day one, literally day one of the administration. I would have expected they'd have gone there first before Chinese import tariff relaxing and going to Saudi Arabia on energy. So, but the fact that they're starting to go down this road tells me that they're getting the picture that the current scenario, the current situation, people find wholly unacceptable.
Definitely. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and just talk about the workplace. So obviously the traditional 9 to 5, or I don't know, we do 8 to 5 workday has certainly seen a lot of changes these past few years. But there's a recent study out from Microsoft that we shared in our newsletter today through our partner, American Society of Employers, that's showing this like third peak of productivity.
Yes, you know, if you were to look back, just kind of the way that the regular American workday has developed over time, you'll see that there's a pre-lunch and a post-lunch kind of productivity increase. And there's with Microsoft, the reason that they would do a study like this is because, well, there's things like here we're on our computers, we're on Windows, and we don't happen to be on Teams at the moment. Maybe we could be in other aspects of our operating system. But in terms of how much work is being done and when it's being done is something, to the extent that it's being done on a computer, that it's that you can get a sense for at least those who do computer work that before lunch and after lunch are two kind of increases in productivity, but there's another one which is after 9 p.m. So you see it's kind of this third productivity increase that you see happening. And of course, that's not terribly surprising. I actually do quite a bit of cleanup work after the kids are in bed. And my kids go to bed around 10. And so after 10, it's not unusual for me to pull up a list that I have, kind of a to-do thing, things that weren't necessarily urgent during the day but I still needed to get back to, and to look it over and hammer out a few of those things at that time. And that's proving to be a regular part of the work cycle. Now, if you have manufacturing shifts and that type of work, naturally, it's a different cycle and a different type of productivity. But noteworthy that this, at least for those that are doing computer type work and office type work, that there is a noticeable third productivity peak that is starting to appear across the landscape. All right, so it looks like we might have a technical issue. Sarah has sent me a text saying that her screen is locked again. So what I'm going to do is just go on with that. We'll just figure out how to get by without her. So let me, so we got two more things on the agenda we're going to talk about. First is there's some finality in the gubernatorial field. And last week when we last spoke, there were a lot of challenges in the election, the access to the ballot issue that some of the Republican candidates for governor, also some local candidates too, in the legislature and judicial candidates, near as I can tell, all of them have lost all the way through that where they've challenged to. And so they got booted out in different ways, but I consider the ballot to be final now, that the 5 Republican candidates that were blocked from the ballot from the board of canvassers, they're out. They will not, there really isn't any realistic way that they could go. James Craig had indicated that he was planning on this story's not over and we're gonna keep on fighting, but the Supreme Court already rejected the challenge. It was on a technical basis. They said, hey, you skipped the Court of Appeals, you got to go back there. But the Court of Appeals already answered with some other candidates that they weren't going to hear it. And so it's really the end of the road. So there's still 5 candidates And of those 5 candidates, the 3 that seem to be most realistic to me are the, oh, it looks like we got Sarah back maybe. So the 3 that look most realistic to me in terms of having the money and organization, name ID, Tudor Dixon certainly had a great several weeks. She turned in more signatures than anybody. Her access to the ballot was never questioned, or never seriously questioned. And then also she got some key endorsements, one that comes with a lot of financial resources, and another one kind of a grassroots organization, more on the Republican side. It's a really strong couple weeks for Tudor Dixon. Garrett Saldano, that we've talked about before, has a kind of a grassroots army out there and has been traveling all around the state doing town halls, and so has a really strong volunteer base, not as many financial resources as some of the other candidates, and then Kevin Rinke, who has been on TV for a while, and so maybe a little bit of a head start on the name ID issues. And then there are a couple other candidates too, but they're Ryan Kelly and Ralph Rebrand are the other 2 candidates. But ultimately, this field is set, and I think over the next month or so, you'll start to see that field probably narrow a little bit more. So not necessarily that anybody would drop out, but just the idea that you'll see, somebody's going to emerge as a clear front runner out of all of this kind of, chaos and uncertainty of the primary process through this state, and it'll settle into a race, and then come early August after the primary, then it'll be a one-on-one matchup, which really does promise to be one of the marquee matchups in the whole country. But there will be a lot of competition for that, because all 148 in the legislature are up, a couple of Supreme Court justices are up, and then every member of our congressional delegation as well. So you might want to turn off your computer and unhook from social media if you don't like politics, because we're going to have a mega dose of politics this year, because Michigan is now kind of a battleground target state for everybody. And there are a lot of races on the ballot, but we'll keep track of it, try to simplify it, sort out the races that we really think that you need to pay attention to, and make sure you know who is pro small business.
All right, well, sorry about that technical difficulty. I think Zoom heard you mention moving it to Teams and decided to take action. So, all right, our last topic for today is Data Monday.
All right, so we're going to do just a quick roundup here of the data, and I alluded to some of this last week in a quick roundup from the island, but I just wanted to share with you that generally everything's going in a good direction here. So you see the heat map. Wasn't too long ago, you saw a lot more redness in Michigan in the Northeast. That's cooled off significantly. So you see the entire country itself kind of hit a peak and is coming down, or at least the expectation is that it'll continue to come down. You see here in the nationwide hospitalization and ICU. So you see hospitalization did go up somewhat, but ICU stayed low. And so in other words, this is a good proxy for people weren't getting seriously ill. Everybody in hospitals that is an inpatient in hospital gets tested. So the fact that hospitalization went up means that overall caseload went up. Doesn't mean that more people are going to the hospital because of COVID. In many cases are going for some other reason. And then they're just found to have COVID. We see that that deaths actually generally flat, or generally a bit of a downward trend as well. So good news there. It looks so different from every other wave that we have seen. Here's the Michigan numbers, and you'll see it's kind of jagged because the state doesn't report very often anymore. It's basically once a week, and so you'll see it hit a peak and it started and it's come back down. So really some great news here. You see the peak was actually probably the lowest of any wave And you might say, well, wasn't this wave smaller in the beginning? But there was no testing back here. So really probably the smallest one that we've seen, and the least amount of hospitalization for sure. Looking at the Michigan numbers, same type of a story of, although hospitalization now has started to go down, but I thought I'd just kind of zoom in here so you can see how flat this really was over the last 90 days. You'll see that inpatient hospitalization and then intensive care units really did just stay very flat. Slightest bit of an upward trend, but very, very flat. And then you'll see in terms of deaths, kind of looks pretty similar to the national results as well, which is good. So different feel, different look than before. It's noteworthy that we did have kind of a spring wave here, but it never amounted to anything. And best evidence yet that the pandemic has now moved into more of an endemic phase where the impact on the population is not so different from other types of bugs and flus and viruses that run through our population regularly.
All right. So before we say goodbye for today, I want to remind everybody that next week, Thursday, June 16th, is our annual meeting and Small Business Summit. Brian and I had an opportunity this morning to kind of preview the keynote presentation, and it's going to be fantastic. So we have 3 small business owners who will be joining us to share their stories of business in transition. We have Chris Shepler of Shepler's Ferry, Gita Thorson of Stormy Cromer, and David Roy, formerly of Marana Group. So please join us in Lansing next Thursday. Tickets are still available at sbam.org. So with that, we'll say goodbye and see you on Thursday.
All right, everybody, I see you on Thursday, and please do come to the annual meeting. It is going to be an awesome presentation. Especially if you're interested. If we just know each other across the screen, and you'd like to get to know the organization a little bit better, the annual meeting is just a great way to do it. The whole SBAM team is involved in preparing and laying out that day. We have great programming that is driven by our members and presented by our members. Just really fabulous, more so this year than ever. So please don't miss it. But before then, I'll see you back here on Thursday.